Okay, great. Well, thanks, Katie, and welcome everyone to Microsoft Word Mail Merge. Um, in your handout, you will see the description of what we're going to be looking at today. The first thing I'm going to be showing you is how to create a data source in Microsoft Word. There are a number of different ways, but I'm going to show you my preferred method of creating a data source. And then from that data source, I'm going to be showing you how you can create different kinds of labels. We're going to look at mailing labels, file labels that you might want to use, say, for exhibits. You can create name tags. There's quite a variety of different kinds of labels that you can work with, and I'll be showing you a couple examples there and how to actually merge them with the data source that we create. Also, what I'll be showing you is how to sequentially number labels. If you end up with labels and you want to have a unique number on each one of those labels, you have the option to add what's called a sequence number, which I'll show you how to do. And then finally, we'll be looking at how you can use Mail Merge to send bulk email messages. Um, years ago when people used Mail Merge, they'd actually create a letter and then they would merge with the data file and then they would actually print those letters and send them out by mail. But there is definitely a trend now to actually sending those mail merges via an email program such as Outlook. So I'll be giving you a chance to see how that can be done. So as I said, the first step we're going to look at is creating the actual data source. So you always have your main document that has the text that's going to be the same for every label or document that you're working on, and then you have your data source that is your variable information, such as a list of addresses, or in the example that I'm going to give you today, exhibit numbers and descriptions that we could use to create file labels. So I prefer to set up my data source in a Microsoft Word table. And the advantage to doing that is I have a separate file that I can easily access. I can easily edit it because if I want to keep using, quite often I use the same data source all the time, and I might just update it, especially if I have like a customer list. I may update it regularly, but I generally have it set up so I can access it quickly and then just make those modifications. So when you're setting up the table, how you want to think of it is that each row is considered a single record, and each column is a field that is going to be inserted into the document. And that first row has the labels that identify that information. And so when it merged, those labels will appear as the names of the merge fields. So the example I'm going to give you today is we're going to create a 3-column table that's going to be used for our exhibit labels that we'll be creating in the next step. So my first step is to go to the Insert tab, and under the Insert tab, I'm going to go to Table. And this particular one that we're going to create is just 3 columns wide. So I'm going to highlight 3 by 1, and then I'll actually go down. So I've actually highlighted 3 by 2. You don't have to know how many rows you need because as you add the data, the table will automatically expand, but you should have a pretty good idea about how many columns you need. Now, the limit in this screen, you can see if I drag across, the limit is 10. So I can only access 10 fields in here. But if I went down to Insert Table, this option below the grid, that'll bring up a dialog box and I can change the number of columns and I can go up to 62. So the limit when you're using Word as a data source is that this number of columns has to be limited to 62. If you wanted to use more, you could create your data source in Excel, but 62 is really, that gives you quite a few that you can work with. But as I said, in this case now, I just need 3. So since I'm already in this dialog box now, I can choose 3. I'm going to leave it at the number of rows of 2. And the auto fit behavior here, you can see right now, it says fixed column width and it's set for auto. I can adjust this. I like to put it at auto fit to contents because then it will auto fit as I fill in my information. So I'm going to click OK. And now I've got a very small little table because I haven't actually inputted any information. And I'm just going to increase my view here so you can see clearly what I'm doing. So as I type, because I chose that auto fit to content, as I'm entering the information in, you can see it's expanding. So there's my field for the exhibit number. I'm going to press the tab key to get to the next column. And now I'm going to put in the description. So I'm just following what's on page 2 of your handout. I'm just using the sample that I've given you there. And then I'm going to tab over again, and I'm going to put in opposing number. And now when I hit tab, it goes to the next cell. So the first exhibit is going to be 1. And now my description here. So again, you can see as I'm typing in the description, the AutoFit is adjusting the width of that column. So I'm just going to, for sake of time here, I'm just going to put in 2 records. So again, you can see it's expanding further because there's more information there. And if I did have another record, I could press the tab key and you can see it automatically adds another record for me. You don't want to leave an empty blank row because that will actually produce a blank record. So I might end up with an extra label that I didn't want, or in the case of if I was doing a mail merge into a document, I would end up with a blank document at the end. So if I've accidentally hit tab at the end, I can just undo using my undo button up here, the curving arrow, that'll take it back up, and now I have my list. Now, if I had forgotten to choose the auto fit option while I was inserting my table, at this point, I could go under the layout tab and you'll see there's an auto fit option here. So there's the auto fit contents option. And if I wanted to expand this right across, I could also choose auto fit window, and that's just going to expand it further so it fills the whole width of my page. So the difference there is auto fit to contents will adjust each column based on the information in each column. And then auto fit window just expands it further so it makes it the full width of your document. If I had more than 3 columns, I could change the orientation of my page. So I could go to layout, click orientation and choose landscape. That will make it a wider page. And I'll just reduce my view so you can see that width. So there you can see, because the auto fit window was on, as soon as I adjusted to landscape, it automatically expanded to the whole page. In this case, I actually don't need landscape, so I can go back to layout, orientation, and put it back to portrait. And again, you can see it's adjusted. So depending again on how many columns you have, you may need to change that. So now that I've created my document, I'm going to save this, and I'm going to just put it, I have a folder here in my favorites called data I'm going to put it into, and I've already have one called exhibit list, but I'm going to use the same file name, and I'm going to override the one that I had created before. And now you can see I've got the file saved. So that is the first step. That's the step that can take a bit of time depending on how much information you have, how many records you need to create. That part can actually take some time, but it's pretty easy to set up. Anybody could set it up for you, and then you could actually use it for the mail merge. And at this point now, I'm going to go to File and Close. And I can't remember if Katie mentioned this when we started, but I'm going to be taking questions at the end. So at this point, if there's anything that's not clear in what I showed you there, you can just make a note of it in the chat panel, and then I will answer the questions at the end. So now that we have our list, our next step, as I mentioned, is we're going to be doing labels. And so this first example I'm going to give you is how you can create file folder labels. And these are labels that I'm going to use on my exhibits. So once the list has been created, I'm now in another blank document. I'm going to go to mailings, and under mailings, I'm going to go to where it says start mail merge. And when I do that, you can see there's a number of different choices here. I am going to choose the choice of labels. And now what's going to come up is a label dialog box that has a number of different, first of all, a number of different vendors. Now I have got Avery US letter as my vendor, but you can see I can click on the drop down and there is quite a variety of different vendors. So depending on where you've actually purchased your labels, you can see There's quite a few different ones. So this is just one of the most, Avery seems to have the most common, and they're the ones that have the most variety of labels as well. Now, when you purchase your Avery labels, in the upper right corner of the package, there will be a number. So you can look for the product number in the list if there's a number on the package. And I'm just going to give you an example of the one that I have used in the past, and that is this one here, 5066. File folder label. So when you click in the list, if you type 5066, it should take you down to the list. So if I was way up here at the top, I can do 5066, and you can see now it's actually taken me down to that label.
Lori, I just did this last week. I was very proud of myself. And
Oh,
it was
good.
so easy, actually. The Avery does make it so easy. And just to, sorry to interrupt you, but we
That's
are
okay.
dropping the files into the webinar. A couple of people said they didn't see them, so that was our mistake, adding those
Oh,
now.
okay.
Okay, I'm being
Okay,
quiet.
perfect. I think they were late because we had at a holiday Monday here in Canada. We had Thanksgiving the other day, and I
Right.
think they didn't come in until yesterday. Okay, so here's the file folder labels that I'm going to choose, and I'm going to click OK. And now you can see the actual labels on your screen. Now, if you don't see the labels on your screen, I don't know if I've mentioned this in the handout, but this is basically the labels are a table. And so it behaves like a table. And one of the features of tables is the grid lines don't show unless you ask for them. So I'm going to click the layout tab up here at the top, and you can see view grid lines is turned on. So you need to make sure that those are on so you can actually see what your label looks like. So now that I can see the label, right now it's just, there's nothing attached to it. So my next step is to actually specify what list I want to use. So I'm going to go back now to the mailings tab. And you can see there's an option that says select recipients. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to choose use an existing list because I want to use the list that I just created. Now you will notice an option here that says type a new list. I don't recommend using that option because what it does is it actually creates a file that's attached to your labels, and it's a data, it ends in MDB, which is actually a database file, and it's not easy for you to actually access it if you want to have it as a separate file. So that's why I prefer to do it the way I showed you, where I create a table and then put the information in the table. This option is not bad, it's just that you don't have the same amount of flexibility. So I have my list now, so I'm going to choose use an existing list. And now the dialog box comes up, and it is defaulted to a folder labeled my data source. That's not where I actually saved my file. So I can just scroll up here to the top, and in my quick access, I put it in this data folder that I have, and there you see the list. So your data sources can be in a Word format. You can also see down here, there's other formats I can choose from. So had I created this as an Excel spreadsheet, you can see I could choose an Excel file. There's quite a few different options in here. So I'm going to go with exhibit list that I've done as a doc file, and I'm going to click open. And I don't see it, but I know it's now attached because within my labels, I can see all these fields now that say next record. And those are necessary when you're working in labels, so it knows to put the next record in the next cell and not on another page. Much earlier versions of Word, you had to actually put those codes in yourself, which was rather time consuming. But here, at least it does them for you. So I'm just changing my view to page width now so we can see this more clearly. So what I now need to do is set up my first label. And what I'm going to do is just set it up with the fields the way that I want them to display. So the first field that I want, I'm going back here to mailings. You can see here there's an option here that says insert merge field. So because I'm now attached to my exhibit list, when I click this drop arrow here where it says insert merge field, there's the 3 fields that I entered in my list. So those are the 3 things that were at the top of each column. And notice that it put an underscore where there was a space. So when I typed the words exhibit number, I left a space, and now Word has put in that underscore for me. So all I have to do is now I'm going to choose the exhibit number. It puts the field in. I'm going to leave a space. I'm going to go back and choose the description. And then I'm going to press the enter key because I want the opposing number to go on the next line. Now, I want to format this a little bit. So once the fields are inserted, you can decide how you want each field to display. So I want the exhibit number to be quite a bit larger so it stands out more. So I'm going to highlight the code. And now on the Home tab, I'm just going to click bold because I want it to be in bold. And I actually want a different font other than Calibri. I'm going to make it Arial, and I'm going to make it size 14. So whatever formatting you want to do to the field, you just have to highlight the field. And then the other two fields, I'm going to select both the description and the opposing number. I'm going to change those to Times New Roman as well. And I'm going to make them a little bit smaller. I'm going to put them down to 10. And I'm actually going to turn my paragraph marks on here on the Home tab. So this Show Hide Paragraph button, that's in the paragraph group here. And that's, I just want to see where the Enter key has been pressed. And you can see when I pressed Enter after the description, it put in an extra space in here. And that's because if I look now on the Layout tab, I'll see that the spacing before is set for 3.7 point and the spacing after is 8. So that's for this paragraph right here. So I want to change that spacing to 0 because I want the text to sort of be closer together. And I'm also going to remove the before space. But now I want the information that I've got filled in there to actually be centered vertically on the label. So I'm just going to go now to the Layout tab up here at the top. So not the layout beside design, the layout over here beside table design. I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to just look here in the alignment group. You can see there's 9 icons or little thumbnails that represent the alignment of the text within the cell. And the one that's chosen right now is this one here where it says align top left. I'm going to click the one below it that says align center left. So my text is still going to line up on the left, but it should appear centered and it's not. And the reason why it's not is there is an extra paragraph mark now at the end of opposing number. I didn't put that in, but that was already on the cell when I chose the mailing label. So I can delete that paragraph mark at the end of the word, end of the field opposing number, and now you can see it's shifted down and it is actually centered vertically. I'm just going to double check, and actually I see some spacing issues here as well. I'm going to make those both 0 as well. So on both lines, they both were 3.7 before and 8 point after. I should have them both highlighted. I wanted them both to be 0 before and 0 after. So again, if I had highlighted all this at once, the before spacing to 0 under layout and the after to 0. And then under layout, this middle option to make sure it's vertically centered. Now, everything I've now done has only been done to the first label. So the next step is really important because you can see all the other labels don't have the information. And what I used to do until I knew I could do this is I would just copy and paste the fields in each label, which was time consuming when I had a lot of labels. So if I take a look now back under the Mailings tab, you will see an option in the Write and Insert Fields group. There's an option right here that says Update Labels. So now that I've set up the first label the way I want, I can simply click Update Labels, and now all the other labels have the information that's needed. And it knew to put the information following the next record field. So I didn't have to do that. It just filled it all in for me. If I decide I want to make a change, and just to give you an example, if I wanted exhibit number on one line, description on another, and opposing number on the next line, I could now go in here in between the two fields if I pressed enter. So now I've got all 3 things on separate lines. If I click update labels, they all change. It's not clear, it went really quick, but you can see next record is beside exhibit number, but now description is on the next line as well as opposing number. Again, if I change my mind, I can go back up now beside the exhibit number field. I can delete the paragraph mark, put in a space, and now update the labels. And now I can see there's no paragraph at the end between the after the exhibit number. Now to complete the merge, what I will now do is click the Finish and Merge button, and then I'm just going to go to Edit Individual Documents, and then click OK, and there's my two labels. So you can see that it did put the information on the right spot. It doesn't look like it's really centered, and that is because this actually took up 2 lines. So it is actually centered on the cell. But now that I see the result and I think, well, it looks kind of funny with the number. I think it would look better now that I look at this, maybe to have the exhibit number on a different line. So now that I see the result, I can go to File, I can go to Close. I'm not going to keep this. This takes me back to the original file. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the description onto its own line. And then for the opposing number, I'm actually going to put brackets on either side of the field. It's another option I can take a look at. And now again, I'm going to update the labels and then go back to Finish and Merge. Why I'm choosing Edit Individual Documents as opposed to Print Documents is I like to see the labels before I print them. So I'm going to go to Edit Individual Documents, click OK, and now I can see the result. But now you can see it doesn't quite fit. So because of that, again, sometimes there's a little bit of going back and forth until you get the right effect. So maybe I can't have the font size 10, maybe it should be 9. So again, I can close, go back here. So I'm going to change both of these now to 9. And again, under mailings, I'm going to, each time I make that change, I have to remember to update. Now I can go to merge. And there you can see it fits a bit better. Now, the only issue is you can see because I put in that bracket around the field, it's now put it on all the empty labels. And usually when I print file labels, I like to reuse the blank labels. So now that you see that, it might have been better if I wanted a bracket around the opposing number, it would have been better if I had actually put the bracket in the data source. And also, this is taking up a lot of room. Maybe I should have abbreviated the date so it didn't wrap around. So when I see those kinds of issues, how I fix that is, again, I'm going to just close this without saving. And I can't open the original data source while I have these labels open. And I'm going to make the assumption that I do exhibit labels all the time. So now that I've taken the time to get this all set up, I'm just going to go to File and Save. And I'm going to put it in my, sorry, I'm going to do this out of NetDocs. I'm going to put it in that data folder I was using up here under my quick access. And I'm going to call this Exhibit Labels. So the thing I want you to realize is when we've selected the recipients, they are actually attached to this file. And how I know that is if I go to Edit Recipient List, there I see the two records added. So, and this actually tells me there I can see where the data source is. So I'm going to OK that, and I'm just going to close this for a minute now that I've saved that. And now I'm going to go back in and just get a new file on my screen here. Sorry, I got two screens going. So now if I go to File, I can see the original exhibit list that I created. I'm going to open it back up. So I want brackets around the opposing number. So I'm going to put those in here. And then I want to edit this because this is too long. I'm going to abbreviate this. So it's September 15/22. Okay, and then I'm going to save that, close it. And now when I go back and open up the exhibit labels, I get this message that tells me that I'm connected to the list. So I see that I'm still connected to the list. The data from the database will be placed in my document. Yes, I want to continue. And then when I go to mailings, finish and merge, edit the individual documents, and then click OK, there I can see I've got the new merge. And the only thing I forgot to fix there is now I've got double brackets because I still had the brackets in the actual file. But the main thing I want you to see here is now the description fits properly because I've shortened it. So I could have also, because it's Times New Roman 9, if I didn't want to make the font any smaller, it's worth it to actually change the description so it does fit on one line. So once you produce your actual labels, these could now be printed. But I would, once I've printed it, then I don't need to save this, but I keep this as a record. So again, because I saw those extra brackets now, I'm going to backspace the brackets. And again, I'm just going to update the labels. And I'll just do the merge one more time just to make sure that the brackets are now only single brackets, and there you've got your labels. Now, so right now the data source is still attached to the file. And as long as if I leave it that way, I can always just open up that exhibit list and add more records to it or delete old ones. And I can just keep using the same list every time I want to create exhibit labels. And if I didn't want it to keep it attached, I could go under Start Mail Merge. There's an option just to choose normal Word document. That will then detach the list, so it won't be attached to it anymore. So you would do that if you don't want it to stay attached, but if you do, you can just leave it as is and then just open the original file and edit it as you need to. Now, I want to show you a couple of other options that we have with the labels. So I'm going to close this one and I'll save the changes. And now I'm going to open, there was a data file that we gave you that would have also been along with the handout. There's a file called customer list. I'm just going to open that so you can have a look at it. And I already have it open, so let me just open it. Sorry, I had it on my other screen. So there's the file. So you can see this was set up in columns and rows, and the field names are up at the top, and you can see that this contains some email addresses, it's got mailing addresses, it's got some amounts paid, it's got a balance, and it's got a deadline. So there's a bit of information that I have access to. What I want to show you is, first of all, how we could create address labels out of this, and then also how we could create name tags, because maybe we're going to have a trade show and this is a list of my customers and I want everybody to have a personalized name tag. So now that we've seen what the list looks like, I'm just going to close it. And then I'm going to start a blank document. So the first thing I'll show you is the mailing labels. So I'm going to go to mailings. So same steps as we did before, mailings, and then start mail merge and labels. And now in this list, what I'm looking for are address labels as opposed to file labels. So this is one that I use quite often, 5160, but again, you would look at your Avery labels, you'd look at the number on the upper right corner, and that's the number that you would choose. So now when I choose OK, you can see this gives me, I think it's 3 by 10. And again, if the grid lines were not showing, that's under layout and view grid lines. Once you've turned them on once, they will always be available when you go into either a table or if you go into labels. So as we did before, now I need to attach to my list. So now I'm going to go to select recipients, use an existing list, and my list is in my data folder and it's called customer list. So that gives me all my, you can see next record and all the fields, and now I'm going to bring in the address. Now, Microsoft Word actually has a default called address block, and I'm going to click on that and see if it gives me what I'm looking for. It comes up and it gives me an example, and you can see it hasn't actually included the customer name or the contact name. It's just giving me the address. So at this point, I could click here on Match Fields, and I could go through and I could try and figure, so this is the fields that are required, and I could go in and choose the appropriate fields that match. I find this a bit complicated for me to read through, so I like to do it another way. Now that I see this, I'm just going to cancel that. What I like to do is just use the merge fields, because then I can actually, I find I have more control. It's easier for me to understand what because I can see my fields in here instead of trying to match them. So I'm going to choose the customer name. Actually, no, I'm going to choose the contact name first, because I want the contact person's name. Then I want to have their company name, and I'm just pressing enter after each one. And I can see already I've got some spacing issues here. If I want to now change the spacing for all of my labels, I can click this little symbol up here in the upper left corner. That will highlight the whole table. And then I'm just going to go to the Home tab, and I'm going to, Layout. And I'm going to change the spacing before to 0 and the spacing after to 0. And that will tighten it up. So now I've got my contact, my customer. Now back to mailings, back to insert merge field. Now I'm going to put in the address, pressing enter. Now the city and the state and the zip code I want all in the same line. So after city, I'm going to type a comma and a space, and then I'm going to go back to merge fields, and I'm going to choose the state, and I'm going to leave a space, and then I'm going to go back in and choose the zip code. And then I have an extra paragraph mark down here, which again I can see because I have my paragraph marks on here. So I'm just going to delete this extra one. And I'm also going to delete the one at the end. And now my label is all up at the top. I want my label to be vertically centered. So the same thing I showed you before, I can click on the Layout tab, and then I can click this one here, Align Center Left. So it's the first one in the second row of thumbnails. And now my label is now centered vertically on the page. And now I'm going to update all my other labels. So I'm going to click Update Labels. Now I can see they all look like they're updated. And now if I go ahead and do a finish and merge, edit the individual documents, click OK. Now I'm going to see all of my labels. Now what's interesting is my first one is centered vertically, but the rest of them are not. I'll show you how we can fix that. But you can see otherwise, it's all the labels are there. So I'm going to close this. I'm not going to save it. So when I'm on this file, so I was on this particular cell, so the first cell, and I had gone to layout and I'd chosen the Align Center Left. And then when I went to mailings and update labels, it updated all the labels, but it didn't pay attention to the vertical alignment. So to make sure the whole thing has that vertical alignment, this is another example when I would select the whole table, and then under layout, I would now click Align Center Left, and you can see now all the other ones centered as well. And then I'm going to just go to File, Save, and go to my data folder, and I'm going to call this Mailing Labels. And then I'm just going to close this because I want you to see what happens if I go to open it again. So let's say I've done my mail out, and then next month I need to do another mail out. When I go to File and I bring up the mailing labels again, I'm going to get, again, that message that comes up that says it's going to run the following SQL command, and it's selecting the information from my customer list. So as long as I keep my customer list maintained, every month when I need those labels, I just have to click yes, and then I can go straight to mailings, finish and merge, edit the individual documents, and OK. And there's all my labels again. So if I need to print an updated list each time, I have the ability to do that. Now with that same list, I want to show you how I can create name tags. So I'm going to click a blank document, and I'm going to go to mailings. I'm going to go to Start Mail Merge and choose Labels. And now what I'm looking for are name badges. And you can see there's quite a few different ones. I'm going to go with 5140. And again, you would just pay attention to which one you actually chose. So when I've got these before, there's different kinds of mailing labels, or sorry, name badges that you can get. If you want them to go in those little clear, there's clear cases that you can get that have strings attached to them. Some people like to use those, so people aren't actually sticking name tags to their body. They're actually putting them in those little plastic holders. You can buy those, or you can buy the ones that actually have clips attached to them. I always just go get the labels first before I actually produce them, so I know which label is going to be the right size. So I'll just go with this one to start with. So 5140, I'm going to click OK, and I'm just going to change my view to one page so you can see it's going to fit 2 labels per page. And then I'll go back to page width. And so now I need to go back to mailings, and now I need to attach myself to the customer list again. So I'm going to go to select recipients, use an existing list, and then switch to my data folder. And again, I'm going to choose that customer list. And now I can go to insert merge field, and all I want here is the person's name, so the contact. But then I also want to have below that, I want their company name or the customer name to show up. Now, when I choose this, if I want to actually see what this looks like, to see how this is going to work out, I'm going to click here on the ribbon, this preview results. So I'm not actually merging yet, but I can preview it and I can see, okay, well, there's the first person's name and there's their company name. And then I can click so I see the code. So you can go back and forth between that to see the result. Now, I want this to actually be centered. So I'm going to go to layout and I want it centered completely. I want it vertical and horizontal. So I'm going to choose this middle icon. So it's going to put it down in the middle. I'm going to get rid of this extra paragraph mark at the end of the customer name. And then I want the contact name to be larger than the actual customer. So I'm going to go, let's try about 36. And then I'm going to go back to mailings and have a look at that in the preview. Just making sure the name is going to fit. I think maybe that's a bit big. I'll go down to say 24. Maybe even, it's interesting, it doesn't look like it's changing. I think I need to see the codes again. Let's see. Now I should have made sure the paragraph mark went small too. Okay, so that's down to 24. And let's do a preview. Again, back under mailings and preview results. And then maybe I want to change the font. So I'm going to make the whole thing Arial, but then this to the name, I'm going to actually make it Arial black. So it's a little bit heavier. And then back to mailings, and you can see it hasn't put the information on the other label. So now I would hit update labels, and now I can see there's the other one. And this one is not centered. So I would click in this cell, back to layout, and then I would choose the center option. So this one's a little bit easier because there's just 2 labels to deal with, but you can see what they're going to look like. I'll go back to mailings, take the preview off. I can see the codes are on both places. And then there's my next record one. And I'll just go back to 100 so I can see that easier. So there you see the 2 labels. And I can go ahead and merge this under mailings, back to finish and merge, edit the individual documents, and OK. And now you can see there are all of my labels. So 2 per page, and then the last one just has 1. And I could, if I wasn't ready to print this, I could now save this as a separate file and I would have all my labels ready to print in this file. And then I would also keep this because next time I have an event where I need name tags, I can just pull this up and use that for another merge. So I'm going into data and I would call these name tags. Now, what I want to add to this name tags now is I want to add a number to these. And the advantage of adding a number would be an easy way for you to be able to tell how many people you have attending the actual event. And then also by numbering them, maybe you want to be able to have some kind of a draw, and then that way their number is the number that you might be drawing is on the contact card or on the name tag as well. Also, when I have used these, I actually had to create parking passes one time, and the parking passes all had to have unique numbers. So I basically set them up using this template because the parking passes, I wanted them to be quite large, and I just printed them on regular paper instead of labels, and then I cut them, and then I had all these individual parking passes with unique numbers on them. Now, how you add the unique number is it's a special field that you can add. So where I want it to actually show up is I'm going to have it down in the bottom right corner of the field. So I'm just clicking at the end of the customer name, and I'm going to change the alignment so it's over on the right. And where I'm going to find this code is under mailings. In the rules tab, there's an option that says merge record number. So I actually said sequential numbering, and now I hope I'm not confusing you. There's two different ones. There's merge record number and there's merge sequence. The reason why I'm using merge record number is I actually want the record number to show up. If I did sequence, because there's only two on the page, I wouldn't get the numbering the way I want for this in this particular case. So by choosing merge record number, I'm actually going to get the record number in that table. So the table that you saw of the customer list, I'm actually going to get the actual record number. So I'm going to choose that. I can see there's now a code. I want there to be a little bit more space in front of that. So I'm just going to enter a couple times. And I want this to be maybe a little bit more let's see what that looks like. I'll preview that and see if I like the look of that. I don't. Let's see if I change. So I'm moving this number down, but now this isn't where I want it. So I'm just going to change the spacing before it. There we go. So you kind of have to experiment with this top line to get it where you want. And then you can see now there's my number down at the bottom. So it would be fairly it wouldn't be that conspicuous with it being down there at the bottom. And it's size 11. I could actually choose to make it smaller if I wanted to. However I want it to display, you can see I've got it down there at the bottom. And then I just have to go to mailings and update the labels. And now you can see it shows up on the other one as well. I'll take the preview off. You can see now you don't see the code. It's because of the spacing that we've got there. So by having the preview on, you can clearly see that we're going to get a number on both of them. And now I'm going to go ahead and do finish and merge, edit the individual documents. Now you'll notice I'm always doing edit individual documents instead of going to print. Once you're really confident in this, you can go straight to print. You don't have to actually see them first, but I have this, I just like to see that it all worked before I actually print it. But there is an option to just go ahead straight to print if you need to. So I'm just in this case here because I want you to see it. I'm going to go to edit, I'm going to click OK, and there you can see there's all of my labels, and there is a unique number in the bottom right corner. And again, that's the number of the record. And I can see it's not displaying here. That's because Catherine's name actually wrapped around to the next line. So it looks like we might have something we need to fix here. So I'm just going to close this. Back on my original label, I'm now going to take the preview results off, and I'm just going to adjust now the size of this from 24 to 20. I can see that maybe this needs to be a little bit smaller. And again, I'm going to save this. So it's still called name tags. And then I'm going to go back to mailings, finish and merge, edit individual documents. Okay. And it looks like it's good. So this, again, just shows you an example of why that was really important to edit the individual documents first so you could see that. Had I gone straight to the printer, I would have ended up with one label at the end without the actual record number. So again, it's always just a good idea to see them first. Okay, and now I'm going to close that. I'm not going to save it. I'll just do a final save on these name tags, and then I'm going to close that and just start a blank document. So the last thing I want to show you today is how you can do a mail merge to Outlook. And the advantage of this, what we're going to be doing is basically we're going to use a mail merge to send the same email message to a list of recipients. So the list of recipients that we're going to use, I'll just refresh your memory here. We're going to be using this customer list. So in the customer list, the only requirement I have to make sure I have is that the email address needs to be typed in one of the columns. If you don't have an email address anywhere in your data file, then it's not going to know who to email it to. So you just need to make sure that somewhere in your list, it doesn't matter what column it's in, but one of them has to have email addresses in it. So now that we've seen that, in the blank document, we can go up to mailings as we've done before, back to start mail merge, but now instead of choosing labels as we've been doing, we're going to choose email messages. And now it just takes you to a screen where you no longer see your page layout. It's just basically, this is basically if I look under the view, you can see what it's done is it's put me in web layout. So it's giving me a layout that will work for sending an email out. Now I'm going to go still on the mailings tab. I'm going to go to select recipients. I'm going to choose use an existing list. And I'm going to scroll up to data and choose my customer list. Okay, and then from there, you can see I have access to all of the fields under the insert merge field. So in here, I would now basically build my email. And usually, like say if I wanted it to say dear and then the name of the person, I would go into insert merge field and I would choose contact. And then maybe I'm wanting to send this email to tell them that they owe some money. So I'm going to say your account has a balance due of, and now I can go up to the merge field and I can choose the balance field. And then I'm going to say, please pay this balance by, and I want to give them the due date. So again, I'm going to go back to merge field and choose deadline. And then I'll just say, thank you for your attention to this. And then I'll put my name. So what you're seeing here is an email message, but this also could have been a letter. Same process. The only difference is you wouldn't have chosen email message, you would have chose letter as the option. But the building of the field, the building of the body of it is all the same. In a letter, you would also add the inside address before the salutation. So you would have chosen the address, the city, the state, etc., in the right spot. Now I can preview this as I showed you in the other example. So I'm going to click the preview option here. There I can see what the email is going to look like. So I'm looking at Carly's. And then if I want to move through all of the records, I can see here there's an arrow that points left and an arrow to the right. If I click the arrow to the right, it just moves through and I can see it changing. I'm seeing the balance due is changing. I can see the person's name is changing. Now, if you didn't like the fact that it said Dear Ken Thiessen, if you only wanted it to say Dear Ken, what you would have had to do is in your original list, you would have had to split it so there was a first name column and a second name column. Because mine was actually entered the name was all entered in one column under one field called contact, it looks like that. So if you didn't like the look of that, that's what you would have to do. Is you'd have to edit the original document and put all the last names in a second column. And there's no easy way to do that in Word other than inserting the new column and then just moving the, actually I could show you that. You would have to bring up your customer list. I'd click here on the email address, and then I would right click and I would choose insert left. And then it would be a little bit painful, but I could highlight each last name like this and drag it over. So it would be a bit time consuming if you had lots of names, but then this would be contact, I'd say maybe call it contact first, and then this would be called contact last. So that would create two separate fields that then would have to be used in the data source. Now I'll just go back to my email. Now, because I made that change, let me just, sorry, go back there, maybe mess things up a bit here. Sorry, I'll go back to, let's cancel that. Because I'm actually using Office 365. So it actually has auto-saved this. So it looks like I'm going to have to go through and finish this. We've got enough time. I'll just bring these across. So I'm double clicking on the name. That's a little shortcut I can take to actually select just the last name and move it over. Okay, so I've got it separated now. So I've got contact first in the first column, contact last in this column beside it. I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to close. And now, because I'm going to take this, so it's telling me now the contact no longer exists. I'm going to remove that. And now I'm going to take my preview off. And now when I go to insert merge field there, I can choose contact first. So that's the only field I want now. And now when I preview it, you can see now it just says Dear Ken. And if I scroll through, there's Jared. So it's just going to have the person's first name. So you have to think of that when you're setting up your actual data source. It's always a good idea to separate a contact name into, you might even want to have like 3 columns. So you could have a column for their title. So if it was Mr. or Ms. or whatever, their doctor, whatever their prefix is. So you might have a prefix column, a first name column, and a last name column. Now, once you've got the email set up the way you want, you can take the preview off. And then the process that you go through to actually send this is you go to finish and merge, and you would go to send email messages. Now I'm going to choose that, and then the next screen that comes up is this one where it knows to go to the email address. This is the field that had the email address in it. So you can see it shows all of the fields, but it's automatically picked up the field that we had for the email addresses. So the only thing you really have to add here is what the subject line is. So let's say that the subject line was monthly statement or something to that effect, whatever you wanted the subject line to be. And then I'm not actually going to choose OK because those email addresses are fake. But what would end up happening is I would click OK and it would go off to Outlook and it would get sent. So it doesn't stop and let you see them like we could when we were using the edit option. This is actually going to now send those emails. So you want to be really careful that your email addresses are correct in that data file because this is going to go and send all at once. But it's really quick. You saw how many names were in that list. You can see how easy it is now to have a very personalized email to all those names. So at this point, we've covered what I wanted to show you today, but are there any questions?
2 questions. One is there a way to prevent or preview the emails?
No.
And then another one is, does it send 40 emails or does it BCC each or blind copy each recipient?
It sends separate emails. Nobody else is going to see them. So the name, so Catherine's going to see the email and Pam is going to see the email, so it ends up looking like a separate email for each person. There's no, it just has you as the sender, and then you're able to see this is a separate email. So the main reason why you would send them this way is so they're personalized. So you've got the actual, you're addressing the person by name, and then you've got the personalized information within it. So how it's going to show up at your end when it sends is you, in your sent items, you would have a sent email for each person that's in that list.
Great, thank you. Two more questions if we have time. Someone asked,
Okay.
does the process work the same if your contact list is in Excel?
Yes. Yeah, it would be
Mm.
exactly the same process. You would go to select recipients, you would choose use an existing list, and then down here your file would be an Excel file instead of a Word file. But the field names, like there's really no difference between what the table looks like as long as you've got the column names at the top. Yeah, so it's an identical process. Now the only thing I'll actually bring up, I don't know if this is still an issue, but I did this once. Probably about 10 years ago, I sent out individual emails to an Excel list that I had I think it had 800 names in it. And my service provider actually blocked me because they viewed it that I was sending out spam because I sent the mass email to so many people. So I had to wait 2 days before I could send any emails. So like I said, that was either like 10 or 15 years ago. It's quite a few years ago. So I usually suggest that if you're sending something like this to a large group, like 500 or more, I would use a product like MailChimp or some other like a mail program that is actually set up as a mass mailing. But in this case, like I only had 20 names. That's not going to be a big deal. But it's just something to be aware of. You might want to check with your service provider to see if there is a limit on how many emails get sent out at one time, because it was viewed by the service provider I have that I was actually sending out spam.
I've definitely had that happen too, actually, recently. Another question following up on some of the first ones is, does the process work the same if you're, or no, that's not it, sorry. Do they show up in your regular sent items?
Yes. And actually what happened when I was testing this out, just to see if what was going to happen when I did this, is all of mine first went into my outbox before they went sent, before they were sent, mainly because the email address were fake. Yeah, they definitely, so they showed up in my outbox as separate items, and once they were sent, they would show up as regular items in your sent items. So you would see the person's email address, and you would see the subject, and you would basically see the same subject for all of those emails.
And then we have 1 minute, but if you have time, can you explain the best way to attach a file to Mailmerge email?
That's a good one. I don't know that I can answer that, but I will surely look into that. So you want to be able to send now, but it would have to be the same file to everybody. But I don't see an option for that. So let me look into that. I'm sure it's possible, but I don't see an obvious, because we're still actually in Microsoft Word. So let me see if that's
And
possible,
she was
and I'll
just
send you.
saying maybe, or asking, should it be attached to the source list or in the merge field maybe, but I guess you can look into that.
Yeah, let me look into that, and I'll send Katie some instructions that she can send out. I'll send a response. I'll let you know whether it can be done, and then how to do it.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for attending today, and I hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you. Thanks,
Okay,
Lori.
thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.